Welcome to the Teen Life Podcast, where we believe that teenagers are not a problem to be solved. We are here to help you equip teenagers through the power of connection. My name is Chris Robey, and over across from me, once again, is Karlie Duke.
Hello, hello.
Hey, so today we are talking about a topic that is, if you talk to my wife, really near and dear to my heart, because I have 3 kids in school. And love our teachers, love them lots. But this topic of teacher appreciation is, to me, old man Chris, relatively new, something I don't remember doing. And, just the good grades were thank you enough, right? But,
sure.
Yeah, exactly. But something that, as my kids became grade school age, I did not know was an expectation. And I'm not saying that like bad, I just didn't know. And so at a time where things were pretty high stress, like, oh, we got to think about gifts too. That's, that's crazy. So it's like I said, new for me, but especially now the stresses and challenges that teachers are going through is especially important. We want our teachers to know how much we love and care for them.
I wonder too if COVID had anything to do with this.
It was before COVID.
Well, yes, I know that, but I feel like especially now, like after parents had to stay home and homeschool their kids for a while, I think they're like, man, we really have to appreciate these teachers because I know what they have to put up with, and that's just my child. And then you add a full classroom of them.
Oh, absolutely.
I think there is a greater sense of appreciation for teachers right now and what they do. This is always interesting to me, just the timing of it wise, because it's so close to end of school. And a lot of people also do end of year gifts. And so it's kind of back to back. And so Teacher Appreciation Week is May 8th through the 12th. So we put this out a little early to give you some lead time. And what I want to talk about too, like later on, of some ideas of it doesn't have to be big.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to do this huge, grand, spend a lot of money thing. I think just something to show, hey, I appreciate you and the amount of work that you're doing and the way that you're pouring into my child is so helpful.
So to clarify an earlier statement, I think what overwhelmed me was when we had our first kid going to kindergarten, I think we overdid it a little bit. And I remember thinking, we have to pace ourselves.
Yeah.
This is going to be every single year as the kids start stacking on. This is going to get really expensive. So I feel like I needed to clarify my earlier point.
There you go. So to put some context, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but to put some context around what do teachers do for students?
Mm-hmm.
As I was preparing this, I was thinking like they obviously teach, but they do lesson plans. Many use their own money to decorate and furnish their rooms.
Mm-hmm.
That is not provided by the schools. And so they're putting their own money into the projects and the fun things that are in classrooms. They grade papers. Some stand in as a mentor / counselor. Some show up at games and extracurriculars to support students. When they see them in the grocery store, they're not ducking their head. Most of the time, they're standing there and talking to your student and acting excited, or if they're at a restaurant with a family. And so I just think teachers do so much for our students. And like there are just some small ways that we can show, hey, I see you and thank you for all that you do.
When you think about, the important adults in the lives of our kids, they are right up there.
Mm-hmm.
When you get in middle school, high school, you have so many teachers, so it's harder to really point out the ones that are having that big impact. But I don't know if you have younger kids. I don't know if this is a Teen Life podcast, but if you do have younger kids, you tend to have 1 or 2 teachers that have the outsized impact on your student. But I know from talking to my 6th grader, I mean, there's a couple of his teachers that have, even though they have a 50-minute class period, have made an outsized impact on him and how he thinks. And teachers just have lifelong. I mean, you remember a lot of your teachers from when you were younger, right? I mean, think about all the adults that have passed through your life.
Definitely.
The teachers are the one that stick out. So we need to appreciate them.
Well, that's a great point, Chris, that if you have a middle schooler or high schooler, they might have 7 teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might be looking at this going, Chris, Karlie, that sounds great. I do not have the money to do 7 teachers, or if I've got multiple kids, 14 or 21 teachers. And so maybe the answer is ask your student, hey, I want you to pick 2 or 3 teachers that like you feel like you have connected with the most, and let's think of a way that we can show them appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
It's great if you can hit every single teacher, but I don't think you have to do that. When my husband was a high school teacher, he did not get a gift from every single student, but he might get them from 5. And those meant a lot because he knew that he really impacted them that
Mm-hmm.
year. And so I think that's what it's really about. And so some ways to appreciate them, and then we'll get into maybe some gift ideas too if you're a gift giving person, but maybe survey them ahead of time. So you can ask, what do you like? Where do you like to shop or eat? What's your favorite food or drink? Have your student ask those questions or send them an email and try to figure out kind of what they like before you just go crazy and buy something that they would never use.
And one thing we can maybe link on this, Karlie, is back in the COVID days of Teen Life when we weren't doing groups, we kind of did something similar to this at Teen Life where we did a celebrate a counselor. So it was a similar idea, but we actually came up with a Google spreadsheet that had the favorite things list, all those favorite things, and they would fill them out, and we would have a record of them, and we would find ways to make sure those counselors are loved and appreciated during that time. But yeah, it's just a great thing to have on record. They'll fill it because those counselors that we worked with, they were really quick to fill those things out. Whether or not they always got what they wanted was one thing, but they really appreciated when someone popped up with their favorite Sonic drink.
Well, and I'll say this is a great thought for next year. Do this at the beginning of each school year with your kids' teachers, and then you have that ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you just have a little extra time or be like, I'm going to send them something really small, you can do that throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
Something also that costs no money, just a little bit of time, is to either say thank you out loud or to write it in a card.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was doing research for this, I saw so many teachers said, like, we love the gifts, but like rarely does someone actually say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And say the words. And so if you can have your student be like, hey, well, this week, will you just go by each of your teachers and before you walk out of the classroom, say like, hey, I know it's Teacher Appreciation Week and I just want to say thank you. This is a really fun class. And I'm just thankful for all that you do for us. Real simple. Or have them jot down a quick note. They can do it in a card, put it in a Post-it and leave it on their board. Like they don't even necessarily have to sign their name if that like embarrasses them or makes them anxious about like what is going to happen. But something small like that can go a really long way.
Absolutely.
Another idea is to, and this kind of comes back to the survey, appreciate them in several small ways. So you don't have to give them a big gift, but maybe you could do a small thing every day this week or do 2 small things. And like I said, next year, maybe you spread it out throughout the year so they feel appreciated all year round. And we'll give some ideas for that too, but it could be something small like a drink or a flower, like a single flower. Like it doesn't have to be crazy. And then I'll also say if you're an adult or parent and you even feel a connection to the teacher just because of what y'all have been through that year, ask how you can help them in the classroom. Like, do they have a project that they need help with? Do they need to change out a bulletin board? Do they need extra books? Do they need to take out old books and donate them? And you can be like, hey, let me do that for you. And just kind of be like, hey, how can I offer my time to help you do something that needs to be done and you just feel overwhelmed by it?
Yeah.
And then finally, Chris, we feel strongly about this at Teen Life, but if you can, include admin or front office staff as well.
Well, this is something to think about, like especially if you have kids in middle school, high school, and maybe you're a little bit overwhelmed on. I don't know what teacher to send this to, but my guess is we've all interacted with the front desk. We've had to pick your kids up early from school. Maybe you got sick or you had to go up there, but we've all interacted with the front office, and they got a really difficult job dealing with pretty much everybody. School nurse would be another one of those. School counselor, intervention specialist, anyone dealing with the social emotional needs of the student body, especially if you have a counselor who has worked directly with your students some way over the school year, even if it's been brief. Remember, they oftentimes don't get included in weeks like this, and they do a whole lot. So thinking through the support staff, maybe that's more of a calling kind of thing for some people, where like we're gonna do this as a family this year and make sure they feel supported. But we just say that because we know during, like I said earlier, during the COVID times, we were able to do this and got an outsized response from our school counselors and intervention specialists, because they just had not been really recognized a whole lot, and they have a really, really tough job. We want to make sure they know how much we appreciate them.
Mm-hmm. So for some gift ideas, let's hit these pretty quick, Chris. I think you could bring them lunch or breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Send your student with a box of chicken minis. Like,
Hmm.
you can't go wrong. Or ask them like, hey, can I bring you lunch one day this week? What day would work best for you? And can you let me know what you want from Chick-fil-A, if you even want to name the restaurant. And I think that could go a long way. Gift cards are obviously helpful if you know where they like to eat or shop. And it doesn't have to be crazy big. Even if you did a $10 one from Starbucks,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would show appreciation. With that, you could bring them their favorite drink or snack. If you did that survey and kind of did some work, or maybe your student is super observant and kind of had noticed, yeah, my teacher drinks a Diet Coke every single day,
Mm-hmm.
and you could drop one off. I also think things like flowers, potted plants, like a little succulent in a cute pot, would be cute. And I've seen, so you can Google it. You will find a million cheesy tags like, thanks for helping my student grow this year. And so if you want to do something like that, that's super easy. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, maybe you bake them a favorite treat. You could do banana bread. You could do cookies. And that would be an easier thing if you wanted to cover more teachers with less money, where it will take some time on your end, but it wouldn't cost as much. And then obviously we know coffee is a huge deal for
Always.
teachers. So you can drop off coffee. You can maybe drop off their favorite coffee syrup. Something like that would be really fun. But I'll just say, we want to make sure our teachers feel appreciated. So whether it's through a note or a small gift, or if you want to go crazy and do a huge gift, make sure our teachers feel appreciated next week. And be sure to say the words, thank you. Chris, I am so pumped. It is time for some more teen terms.
How many is this? 5?
This is 5.
5, man.
I'll link all the old episodes in the show notes. So if you want to go back, if you've missed out and you're like, well, I don't know what the original ones are. Oh, we'll link them. You can go listen.
Well, I'm a big part of this little segment, and I was having a text conversation with someone recently, kind of trading teen terms, and I petered out pretty quick. And so I think I need to go back and listen to the old ones, because I obviously did not pay close enough attention.
Oh man, Chris. Well, the funny thing is too, and I'll say this, what's hard about teen terms is they come and go so quick.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to stay on top of them, and depending on what your student's interested in or where they live, like you might go, my teen says none of these terms. And that might be true, but there are teens who are saying them.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk through some. I also got some help from Sarah Brooks. If you listened to our 100th episode, she was on there. And so she gave me some ideas as well from her teen experience. But let's kick it off with this one. I still hear it a lot, Chris, but this had a really popular run at the beginning of the year, and that is Nepo Baby.
Okay.
Have you heard of this one?
I've heard of it. I have no clue.
Love that.
This seems very pop culture.
It is very pop culture. So a Nepo baby is a child of a famous actor or celebrity who got famous due to nepotism.
Oh, gotcha.
So basically, they are just famous because of who their parents are.
Hmm.
There are a lot of great examples of this, and I'm kind of blanking. Kate Hudson might be a good example of her parents are very famous. And so is she famous and successful because of her by herself, or because she got opportunities because of who her parents are?
Yeah.
And so it obviously was created for actors and celebrities, but I think I've also heard this thrown around for your average layperson who just gets what they get because of their parents. And so, they're a Nepo baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might hear that one a lot. Now, what about Borg? B-O-R-G. Borg.
I know it in the sci-fi sense, but I know exactly.
I don't think that's what this one
is.
It's
not. I know it's not, but I do know that there's some sci-fi nerdy kind of stuff that's around that.
So someone brought this up to me, and I had seen it a lot. Hopefully, your teenager is not using this term because I would say this is more popular around colleges and universities, but it stands for Blackout Rage Gallon. So they're popular at college and frat parties. And basically, what you do is you fill a gallon with an alcoholic beverage. Normally, it's a mix of like water, and then you add vodka. Some add those like Mio drops where it's low cal, but it adds some flavor and color.
Uh-huh.
And they'll carry it to parties, and so they'll either drink it by themselves or they might share it with two people. Here's what I will say. Horrifying to think of like your teenager drinking an entire gallon of an alcoholic beverage. However, I have seen people talking about like it's better than the old trash can punch that used to be like, hey, someone else mixed this and I have no idea what's in it. So it is I think it's a safety measure that students are taking of, I know exactly what's in this. No one else is going to touch it. It has a lid on it. And I do appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, if you have a teenager at home, this is not one that you want them knowing about or participating in if they are underage.
All right.
Unalive.
Is this related to I'm dead?
Kind of. It's basically like it can be used different ways. Like I'm going to unalive someone, or like I want to be unalive, like either way. So like it's to kill someone or to die is kind of what it means.
Okay.
So a student might say like, oh my gosh, I want to unalive Mark. Like I want to kill him. Or I'm going to unalive myself if that happens. Like I'm going to die if that happens.
It almost seems euphemistic, like it's like, you don't, things are pretty sensitive on school campuses right now. So you don't want to say, I want to kill someone, and just say, I want to unalive.
Right.
It's kind of a way around. Yeah.
Yes. So this one, I am hearing this one quite a bit. And usually it's used like kind of sarcastically. You're like, I'm going to unalive that person. But it is something to keep an eye on because it could have relation to suicide or mental health issues too, if you're watching that. Now, the semicolon, this is not new, Chris, but since we've been talking about mental health lately and kind of have some episodes coming up, do you know what the semicolon is in the context of mental health?
Not mental health, it's a wink, right? And just a text thread.
Yeah, if you do a semicolon and a parentheses.
Oh, you have to have a mouth. Okay.
Well, yeah, that'd be
I'm just
helpful.
thinking of the eyes.
But a semicolon actually is a symbol, meaning someone has struggled with depression, self-harm, or suicide, but they kept going. And so there's this thing called the semicolon project where, like, if you think about a semicolon in a sentence, like it kind of starts a new sentence, but it keeps going. It's not a period like the end. And so I see these tattooed often, or kids will draw them on their skin or like really small on their wrist. And so if you see that, you kind of know that person went through something and they kept going. And so it's something interesting that whether you ask questions or you just kind of like keep your mind of like, oh, that's interesting that they felt the need to put that on their body. And so that's what the semicolon means around mental health. Minty B, speaking of mental health, Minty B.
I had no idea on this one.
I did not know either. So like I said, some of these Sarah gave me and I had to go look them up because I was like, oh, I don't know what that means. But Minty B is short for mental breakdown. So it's a fun, lighthearted way
to say
I'm having a Minty B right now.
That's such a dismissive way of describing that.
So funny. Accountant is the next word, which you probably know what it means, but maybe not in this context, Chris.
All right.
If I had to guess. So this is when someone works as a stripper or in the adult entertainment industry, but doesn't want people to know.
Okay.
So maybe things like, what do you do? And they might say like, well, I'm an accountant, but you can tell that's not what they actually do.
Like the complete opposite of what their job is.
Yes, exactly. Okay. The next two are more drug related. So that is Zaza and Mid.
Okay.
Mid
I wouldn't have guessed being drug related, but
yes. So, well, I guess it doesn't have to be drug related. It can be. Zaza though is top tier or expensive or exotic weed.
Okay.
And so like your really expensive, good stuff. Mid is, so if you're using in the context of drugs, it would be like mid-grade weed, which makes sense. Or it could just be average, middle of the road. Like if you're doing a scale of 1 to 10, you'd be about a 5.
Right.
So they're mid.
Right.
So like I said, it can be drug related, but it doesn't have to. They could be calling a person or an experience mid.
Yeah. Or meh. I mean, that's kind of the, yeah.
Exactly. Now, I had to throw in something Taylor Swift, especially after her tour or with her tour going on, Chris. So Lavender Haze. And part of the reason I put this in here is because Taylor Swift on her new album has a song called Lavender Haze. And we, at the concert, my brother looked at me and he was like, "Is that drugs?" He was like, "I don't know what that means." And I was like, "That's a really good question. Let me look that up." And so Lavender Haze is a phrase that was found in the 1950s, actually. And it's about being deeply in love with someone and kind of being oblivious to everything around them that isn't about their crush or their love interest. So they're in this lavender haze.
Interesting.
Of love. Now, I'm sure you can find other definitions for it as well, or I'm sure there is somewhere that you can tie it to drugs. But what Taylor Swift is meaning is being so in love that kind of everything else kind of fades away, that you're in a lavender haze.
Gotcha.
So those are my teen terms, Chris. Keeping you up to date.
Cannot wait for session 6.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be back soon.
Mm-hmm.
For the tip this week, I saw this really interesting article. I didn't actually watch the clip, but Jennifer Garner recently was on the Today Show. And she was quoted as saying, "I just say to my kids, show me the articles that prove that social media is good for teenagers, and then we'll have the conversation. Find scientific evidence that matches what I have that says it's not good for teenagers, and then we'll chat." And I thought that was so interesting of, number one, there is lots of research on social media and what it does for teenagers and that it's not good. But instead of just straight up saying no, she said, "You know what? Do the research and then come back and let me know." And kind of put that on them. And I was like, that is so smart to do that for teenagers. And then when I thought about it, when I was a teenager, me and my dad were just talking about this the other day. If I wanted to go see a movie, especially if it was PG-13, R-rated movies were not encouraged in my household. But if it was even just a PG-13 movie, my parents made me look up the movie and then tell them why it was appropriate for me to go see.
How successful was that?
Well, I will say there were a few that I would look up and be like, never mind.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even worth like trying to convince you that I need to go see this movie. But then there were some that we could come back and have a conversation of, okay, here's what happens in the movie. Here are some things that I might need to be aware of, but we could have a conversation about it. And most of the time they did defer, especially as I was older, they did defer to my judgment. But that's where things like Common Sense Media can be helpful, that you can look that up. And so maybe if you're a parent who is struggling with, I don't want my teenager to do these things, but they're really pushing back on it, try to put some of that on them.
Yeah, I like this idea quite a bit as well, because then, as you said, at the end of the day, it brings you back to a conversation about something that's really important. That is not just one-sided. That it's not your way or the highway kind of stuff. So if they've done some research and have shown some things, then okay, if that's the case, then let's be using it for that, and really only for that. So maybe it's like, hey, it helps me connect with people I'm not seeing with in a long time, or I'm not seeing in a long time, or helps me push this certain thing that I feel like is good, or so let's use it for that, and so it does keep the conversation open, because we know not everything is all bad. We just know that. And so being able to help find, and maybe there's some things that you have not thought about either as a parent, or a helper when it comes to social media or any other thing that a teenager might want to be into that might not seem like it's really healthy for them. So I think this is a really wonderful thing for a teenager and a parent to engage with. With that, we're going to call this episode a wrap. We're so glad you joined us on the Teen Life Podcast. We encourage you to subscribe so that every Tuesday when a podcast episode drops, it will be right in your feed. Follow us on social media, all the platforms that we have linked on this podcast. Text this episode to a friend. It's a really great way. If there's something here that really resonated with you, make sure a friend knows about it through a text message. Review us on your favorite podcast app. Tell us why you love this podcast. And with that, we will see you next week.